Good evening, everyone. Welcome back to Food Literacy for All. Before we introduce tonight's speaker, I'm going to just make a couple of announcements that are related to this course. So this is the upcoming lineup for the next few weeks. And just a reminder that you can sign up online if you're a community member participating in the course. The links open approximately 1 week before each speaker. So please keep coming and sign up. And I want to also just highlight that we are on break the week of February 28th, so there won't be a class that evening. Oh, these aren't exactly in the order that I thought from before. All right, so this is an announcement for the Local Food Summit. This is a really exciting event that happens every year somewhere close to Ann Arbor. So this year it will be March 20th, save the date, at Eastern Michigan University from roughly 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. There are always lots of opportunities to volunteer at this event, and it's a wonderful way to make all kinds of connections in the community. We have a few organizers of this year's Food Summit in the audience. Would you please raise your hands if you're here? Okay, I see some people over here. So if you have any questions or you're potentially interested, find these folks after class. I wanted to also announce this speaker that's coming up. So we have a special talk for Black History Month by David Pello. He's a well-known environmental justice scholar and activist. He's based out of UC Santa Barbara. So that's coming up on Monday, February 20th at 4 p.m. over in the Dana building, which is just across the Diag. And last but not least, I posted this on Canvas for students, but I wanted to remind all of you that you have a really exciting opportunity to apply for a position as a student manager at the campus farm. Information about how to apply is here. And this is a really wonderful opportunity to get engaged with the local food system on campus, especially from the production dimension. So speaking of local, tonight we're featuring a local speaker, and course co-planner Lily Fink-Shapiro is now going to introduce our speaker for this evening. Oh, did I give away your punch?
It's okay.
President Obama's coming?
So it's an honor to be here to introduce Ari from Zingerman's, who's the co-founder and CEO of Zingerman's Community of Businesses. I was told that I could just say Ari from Zingerman's and that would go better. Zingerman's is the kind of place that all kinds of people go for lunch, and it's definitely the kind of place that when, take for instance, President Obama comes into town, like he did in 2014 when he was here, that he goes way out of his way to go to Zingerman's for lunch. So at the time, there was a lot of buzz around town about the president's visit and about his Zingerman's lunch. And some of you may know that he famously ordered the Reuben, which you also may know features sauerkraut from the Brinery, a local business that uses produce from local farms to make sauerkraut and other kinds of fermented foods. So I mentioned this story because in addition to the way that it showcases the delicious food and the robust community of Zingerman's, it was also notable to many of us that we heard Dave say he just couldn't stop reliving the excitement that Obama ate my sauerkraut. So that's some of the power of Zingerman's. So over the past 6 weeks, we've had a series of outstanding speakers here for Food Literacy for All, and mainly from around the country. So tonight, it's an honor to welcome one of our Ann Arbor's own legends. And Ari is the author of 7 to 9-ish books, and he's spoken all over the world, including to an audience of 50,000 people at the University of Michigan Spring Commencement, which was in 2015. There's over 750 employees across 10 businesses, and the annual revenue is over $55 million. But the business remains very true to its principle of staying local. Ari has been credited with co-owning one of the best delis in the world, but Zingerman's is much more than that. So a couple of weeks ago, Zingerman's established itself as one of Michigan's first sanctuary restaurants in response to its current events, and it has repeatedly been featured as a model business for its equitable treatment of employees. In fact, our March 14th Food Literacy for All speaker, Saru Jayaraman, just wrote about Zingerman's as a model high road business in her new book about the restaurant industry. Better get it. It's called Forked. A few other things you may not know is that in 1988, Zingerman's was instrumental in the founding of Food Gatherers, And also, every year, Zingerman's donates 10% of its profits to local community orgs and nonprofits. Okay, get out your clickers. I should warn you guys. Which of the following is not true about Ari?
Okay.
A, he was recognized as one of the who's who of food and beverage in America by the James Beard Foundation. B, an enthusiastic deli customer managed to name a star after Ari. C, he believes that canned tuna and anchovies actually get better as they age. D, he received an undergraduate degree from the University of Michigan in Russian history. E, he believes that business is a tool that can be used for good or bad. Okay, quick.
I'm not really sure, so you can. The clicker part was over my head, so I'll let them do it.
Okay, you've got 5 more seconds. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. What's the answer? Let's see. So in fact, he does believe that canned tuna and anchovies actually get better as they age. I'll let him discuss that. The answer is B. To my knowledge, I don't think an enthusiastic customer has named a star after him. So I welcome Ari.
That's it, huh? Okay. Well, I wasn't nervous, but after that intro, now I'm nervous. Anyway, how are y'all? I'm good. I've been teaching all day for the last 2 days. In fact, I must not have done that bad because there's like 9 people here who were in the room with me all day today and all day yesterday, and now they came here. So I'm going to endeavor, after speaking for like 16 hours over 2 days, to not completely lose the thread of my thoughts. I'm going to tell you up front, my email is ari@zingermans.com. I also have cards up here, but my hope really from this evening is to start dialogues, and some of you I already know, but to continue dialogues. I can pretty much guarantee that the knowledge in this room far exceeds anything that I could tell you by about a magnitude of 10,000 or something. That's not statistically based, just an estimate. So really, I'm only here to share with you a little bit of my perspective and hopefully to initiate dialogue and conversation so I could learn from what you all know, okay? We're going to do a marketing study. This is how we do marketing studies. How many people have been to the deli? Excellent. How about to the Roadhouse? How many to the Bakehouse? How many have been out to the the coffee company? And how many knew we had Zing Train? I knew you did. Great. How many never heard of us? I don't know. It could be, man. I like when they haven't heard of us because it means there's more business. Okay, so I don't use PowerPoint. I don't like PowerPoint. You have me pointing and you have paper, and you're going to need a pen or pencil or writing utensil of some sort if you want to do all the exercises, though you could do it on your computer. That's fine. 2, I'm also going to just say some of you didn't grab this, but this is our current newsletter, which if you didn't get, I brought it just because I brought it, but I also brought it because it seemed relevant. So it has information about our newly opened Korean restaurant. It has an essay I wrote on African American foodways, and it has an essay on hope, all of which seemed relevant for tonight's conversation. And as I was saying to these guys earlier today, I don't have negative beliefs about multitasking. So it doesn't bother me at all if you read this while I'm talking. In fact, I think it's a good use of your time. So I'm going to give just a little personal background. I'm not going to do the whole Zingerman's in-depth story because Lily kind of gave you enough highlights and you probably all know it. But just personally, I grew up in Chicago. Anybody else from Chicago? Okay, so I came here to go to school. As you saw up there, I did study Russian history, particular interest in the anarchists. Many of you who even go here don't know that, let's see where I am, about 200 yards that way is on the 7th and 8th floor of the Grad Library is the largest anarchist collection in the country. If you want to know how weird I am, I used to go up there and read pamphlets from 1900 and find it really energizing and fascinating. And my U of M career, I think, was highlighted by one day I was has anybody been in the sub-levels of the Grad Library? It's where the roads are really narrow. It's like the old city of Florence. You can't really spread out. So I'm standing down there and I'm in the stacks looking for I don't even remember what I was looking for, but I came across this thin book that was called Foreign Policy of Outer Mongolia, 1907 to 1922. And I was like, God, this looks cool. And I was like, you are really weird. So that kind of sums up my life. But after studying the anarchists and Russian history and Soviet dissidents and all that good stuff, I graduated. We do a lot in our organization with visioning. It's a whole nother subject that I'm not really going to get into today, although it would be a good idea for somebody to write a vision for the food system or the local food system, because if you don't know where you're going, it's very hard to get where you want to go. When I graduated, I had no vision of where I wanted to go. I had what David Whyte, W-H-Y-T-E, the poet and writer whose work I highly, highly recommend, calls the via negativa. Some of y'all might have this too, is where you're clueless about where you want to go, but you're super clear on where you do not want to go. Anybody familiar with that? Yeah, so I wouldn't say it's like the best alternative, but it's better than nothing, because at least you could rule out part of it. Some of y'all have the via negativa about these products up here, like you don't know what's for dinner tonight, but you know this will not be on the menu. So I had no clue what I wanted to do. I just knew I didn't want to go home. In order to make that viable, I decided I would stay here. I liked Ann Arbor. I actually really love it now. At the time, you know, I barely got off campus. I didn't have a car. Before global warming, it was a lot colder in the winter, so like trying to walk from, you know, the east side of campus to like the Del Rio back in those days to have a beer was like a 1.5 mile walk in 14-degree weather. You had to really be determined to have that beer. So I really didn't know a lot of Ann Arbor community until after I finished school, and then I realized there was actually a whole town here that had nothing directly to do with the campus, and I really came to love it. So I feel really honored and privileged to be part of this community and to be doing what I'm doing, and it's really because of people like you that have made it possible, and I feel really honored for that. As you already know, we started Zingerman's in 1982, and Lily already gave you some stats, and you have more stats on page 3 in here, a little box score of what we do. The newest restaurant is Miss Kim. Everything is within 15 minutes of here. I like that. Even my house is within 15 minutes of here. I like local. I could pause for 1 or 2 Zingerman, like if you got a really burning Zingerman's question that you always wanted to ask, but you didn't. Yes, ma'am. When is Miss Kim going to get takeout? When will Miss Kim get taken out, or when will we get? Hopefully soon. We're trying to start slow, because I learned the hard way, if you start fast, like opening a new restaurant, as those in the food business, some of you, who's in the food business here besides, okay. So it's very difficult to open a new restaurant and get things right, so we're trying to ramp up. So we started with just dinner, and then lunch will start in a few weeks, end of the month, maybe first of next month, and then takeout. Sorry, I keep standing right in front of his camera. Good question. What else? Sir? That's a great question, to which I have absolutely no clue. Jihei, okay, that's good. I'm going to write up the code red. We call that a code red. That's a complaint on tonight. I'm going to write it up. But if you email me, then I'll know who you are, and then I'll find out. Because Jihei picked them, and she's the partner, and she's from Korea, but I really don't. In my family, this is what we ate, and we didn't eat it with chopsticks. But it's a great question, and now I'm curious too. Me? I'll deal with the rest. I just don't know. I remember your face, but I can't tell your email from looking at you. So it'll help me. Plus, I'll forget. One more? Yeah, no. Okay, be careful at auctions. Okay, it's time for y'all to go to work. You did the clicker. You passed that. You kind of, actually, you flunked. But you can't flunk this one. So I think you have these, do they have these little desky things that are made for like really small people? Okay, if you want, you could use that or write on your lap. So if you need a pen, somebody else in the room, I believe in spirit of generosity, somebody else I'm sure will help you out. So what I want to do is I'm going to give you about 3 minutes, and what I want you to do is write out everything you believe about food and cooking. The faster you write, the more interesting it will be. The more you stop and stare at me or the ceiling and think about it, the less effective the exercise will be. So I want you to list everything you believe about food and cooking. If you want to do it on your computer, that's fine too. Anybody interesting thoughts? Surprises? just curious. Yes, sir.
Surprised at how different our attitudes towards
Okay.
food and cooking were.
Okay. Differences in beliefs or attitudes about cooking. What else?
We agreed that doing the dishes is the worst part.
Okay. Doing the dishes is the worst part. One more. What else? Jody.
Well, I don't know your name. The young woman that
What's your name? Let's find out. Liz.
that Liz's perspective is very environmentally and socially focused, which is really encouraging.
Great.
Mine was much more cooking is fun.
Yeah, like mine. Okay. Okay, I'm just going to tell you this is a very interesting exercise, which I have done hundreds of times over the last few years. And really what I want to talk about tonight is beliefs about food and cooking. And the reason that when Lily contacted me, this whole like 588-page book just came out in the summer about beliefs, so it's kind of on my mind. And to be clear, I know it sounds odd having written however many-ish books I wrote, and having taught business and leadership stuff all over the country, all over the world really. I never really thought about the import of beliefs up until 3 or 4 years ago. And I know that sounds odd because I'm like obviously not intellectually disengaged, but I just never thought about it. When I say beliefs, I'm not really in the moment talking about religion, sports, or politics, although those are also beliefs, but I'm talking about like low-level beliefs like about doing the dishes, right? And this little cycle that's at the top of page 5 in your workbook, in which with my wonderful artwork I've drawn on this for the first time. What's this called? No one knows. An overhead, no. That's what we used to, well, whatever it's called, overhead projector or not, I drew it in my really bad writing up on the screen, but I'm looking at you while pretending to look at this. So this is a little cycle which I learned from a guy named Bob Wright in Chicago. He and his wife Judith Wright have something called the Wright Institute. They've written a number of books. One of them is called Transformed, which I highly recommend. It has nothing to do with particularly with food systems, but it's a very good read. He can't remember where he learned this cycle from, so I don't know who to give the true credit to, but I'm giving it to him. It's a self-fulfilling belief cycle. It blew my mind, and it turned into a 600-page book, not overnight. Here's how it works. At the top, at 12 o'clock up there, we all have beliefs. You can see it on your page, too. You have beliefs about everything. You got beliefs about people, you got beliefs about humankind, you got beliefs about different ingredients, you got beliefs about, in the food context, like eating dogs or eating meat or eating vegetables, or you might hate something, or somebody in your family thought something was taboo. We all got beliefs about all sorts of stuff. Like, I don't like going to the grocery store. It scares me. I'm just saying. So we all have beliefs. All of us take action based on what we believe. Most of us don't know that we're doing it, but literally every single action you all took today and will take for the rest of your life and have taken every day of your life is based on a belief. The fact that you're here tonight is based on a belief, right? So the A leads to the B leads to the A. We get an action. Based on our action, the people around us start to form beliefs. Based on their beliefs, they take action themselves, and what I learned from Bob Wright is 90-95% of the time, their action reinforces our original belief. Okay? So in human interaction, like in a workplace, which is what we're talking about today, so if you believe, or let's say somebody who you work with, I'll leave you off the hook, somebody you work with believes that somebody else you work with is kind of a jerk, that's their belief, what sort of action will they take when that person comes in the room? What will they do? They'll avoid them. What else might they do? Roll their eyes, body language. When they talk to them, what would be the energetic tone of their conversation? Negative. So based on all of those things, what beliefs will the other person start to form? It's not a trick. You can do this. If you got into school here, you could do this. What beliefs, if you're curt, your energy's bad, you roll your eyes, what's the other person going to believe? You don't like them, you're a jerk. Based on that, what sort of action do they take? They distance, and you go, I knew they were no good. If, on the other hand, you change your story and you say, I'll bet they feel really uncomfortable in our job. It's their third week. They haven't been here. They're from somewhere else. They moved to Ann Arbor. They don't really know a lot about us. And you say, I bet they're uncomfortable and anxious. Why don't I, based on that belief, I might greet them and I might walk up and say, hi, I'm Ari. How are you? And look them in the eye in a meaningful way. What might they then start to believe? It's a welcoming place. Based on that, what sort of action will they take over here? They start to engage and do better work. And I'm like, I knew it was a nice guy. The interesting thing is it's exactly the same people in these two scenarios. All that's changed is the belief. Is this making any sense? This is going on all day long, everywhere you go, every person you talk to, everything you do, everything you read. It's very interesting. So I started to realize that my beliefs were driving everything I was doing. I used to focus mostly on how to change the other person's action. This taught me about good 3/4, if not more, the issue is my own beliefs. So very quickly, I started to class beliefs into 3 broad categories: negative beliefs, neutral beliefs, and positive beliefs. I'm only a history major, but here's the deal. Negative beliefs create negative outcomes. Neutral beliefs don't do much. Positive beliefs create positive outcomes. It is impossible to get a positive outcome from a negative belief. There's a lot of quotes in the books. My favorite is from Alexander Berkman, early 20th century anarchist, who conveniently for me, once upon a time wrote, "You can't grow a rose from a cactus seed." And he's correct. It wasn't even teaching food systems. That was just what he was writing about. You can't grow a rose from a cactus seed. If you have a negative belief, follow the cycle is going to lead to negative outcomes. You can create action from negative beliefs. You could get people fired. You could create riots. You can have lynchings. You can overthrow governments. But you can't create lasting positive sustainability in a community from negative beliefs. Negative beliefs could be anything from as seemingly innocuous as it's a drag to do the dishes, to racism, anti-Semitism, negative beliefs about women in the workforce, etc. Those are all going from very unimportant to really, really, really important negative beliefs. Where do you think beliefs come from? Okay, the answer is all of the above. Here's the key message about where beliefs come from. We are not born with our beliefs. Beliefs are not genetic. Beliefs about doing the dishes is not genetic. Racism is not genetic. It's learned. Who do we learn from? We learn from the people we trust the most. When we're little kids, we learn clearly from the people who are raising us because we don't know enough not to trust them yet. It's true. But we also learn from friends on the playground. We learn from what's on the news. We learn from musicians we admire. We learn from actors we admire. We learn from teachers, ministers, priests, rabbis, books. I learned a lot from books. A lot of my beliefs have been shaped by people that died long before I was born. Okay? But the key is to be conscious of your beliefs, because if you believe and I'm not picking on you, but if you believe, let's say cooking, who believes cooking is really difficult and hard to do? Kind of a drag. So if you follow the outcome of the cycle, when one believes that cooking is a big drag, which I know lots of people who do, what happens when you need to cook? What's the action? You avoid it. And then one day, like, you've avoided all you can, but there's nothing you could do, man. Your mother's coming and you're going to cook. How's your energy? Negative, anxious. When you're negative and anxious, how does anything go? Not well. So the outcome is you'll end up with a not very good, not rewarding experience, and you'll go, see, I knew I can't cook. So what I want to try to do is to change people's beliefs to help them understand, as we'll come back to in a minute, that good food is something everybody can understand. and that cooking is something everybody can learn to do. And that's really my main message. And the third message, and then we'll get into the details here, is that because beliefs are not genetic, we have the freedom to choose what we believe. So if the outcomes that one is getting, either individually or collectively, are not aligned with where you want to go, we might want to consider changing the belief. Because nobody is born with negative bias. We're learning it. And whether that's bias against people, bias against food, bias against agriculture, whatever, they're not born with it. On the other hand, positive beliefs create positive outcomes. What I'm not saying here that there's no such thing as a problem, right? But you can have negative beliefs about a problem, and you could have positive beliefs about a problem. So I'll tell you one anecdote, and then we'll move into this history to illustrate that. So in 1988, Lily mentioned that we started Food Gatherers. It was Paul's idea. So in 1988, a lot of people were going hungry, not unlike now, but a lot of people were going hungry in this community. So a negative belief about that hunger would be the system sucks, people are no good, this is terrible, this is unjust, this shouldn't be happening, this is horrible. A positive belief would take all of that and say, this is horrible, it's unjust, we could do something about this. Why don't we apply what we learned in business to a nonprofit, and let's start an organization that's actually going to address this issue instead of just being frustrated with it. And that was Paul's belief and his vision, and that's what Food Gatherers came from. Right? So the problem is identical. What's different is a negative belief about the problem and a positive belief about the problem. Positive beliefs about the problem, in my experience, allow us to make a positive difference. Is this making any sense at all?
I believe so.
Questions? Surprises? Thoughts?
Do you think negative beliefs are necessary to identify problems to begin with?
I don't know. Are negative beliefs necessary to identify problems? I think we react to the problem. I mean, believe me, I grew up in a very negatively loving family where they showed love and affection by criticizing. So it's not like I grew up, like Paul seems more aligned with, spiritually. I had to learn, it's learned behavior for me. I just find that looking at what's wrong all the time doesn't really get me very far. It creates lots of conversation and it distracts me from doing what I need to do. But looking at what's wrong in the spirit of how do I make it better and what can I do to contribute to a more positive outcome has been, for me at least, far more productive. Does that help at all? Okay, so, yes, ma'am.
It seems like, from what he's saying, you could choose to just look at it neutrally, just objectively, not negative or positive, and then make a decision to react to it positively.
Yeah, the question is, what's your name? Chineri. Chineri? Just getting it in my head. The question is, you could look at it neutrally and then choose. Here's the problem. Do we have any existentialists like philosophy majors here? It's very hard to really know. I'm not talking about alternative facts. It's very hard to really know. And here's why. Because there's one last piece of this and then we're going to do history. It's between your belief and your action. It's a filter. All of us filter information based on what we believe. So it's hard to really know what's really going on. We all filter information out that does not fit with what we believe, and we all take information in that does fit with what we believe.
But the example I would use is weather. People talk about, oh, it's too hot. It's so horrible out. Well, it's just weather. It's what it is.
Right.
So you just look out there, you see it's cold, it's snowy, you prepare for that. You don't have to make a judgment about it, whether bad or good.
Well, I would just say you have a positive belief about the weather, which is that it's nature happening, and that oh my God, it's horrible out is very negative, which ruins your day. And the day of everybody you talk to, who you then tell them how bad it is when they weren't even thinking about it, but now you spread this bad thing. So beliefs in my image in my metaphor are the root system. You can't see it, but everything that comes up above the surface is a direct corollary to what's below the surface. Okay? Culture, I like to look at as the soil. So if the soil's healthy and the root system is healthy and deep, the odds of getting something positive are a lot better. If the soil's unhealthy and the root system's unhealthy, the odds of growing anything are very low, anything good are very low. So let's talk history a little bit, because I'm a history major. Rebecca Solnit, anybody know her work? Yeah, so she's coming here actually. I've never met her, but I'm going to go to hear her talk. I think it's in Rackham on February 20th, if I remember right. So she's also a history person, and she said, to answer the question, where does a story begin? The fiction is that they do and end, rather than that the stuff of a story is just a cup of water scooped from the sea and poured back into it. So when you study history, it's hard to really know where to start. So I didn't know, so I made it up. So I put 4 dates on this sheet. They're not random, no. Here's why they're on there. 1902 is when the building that the deli was built. I'll tell you the story. 1956 is when I was born. You too? Dude, what's your birthday? Oh, I'm ahead. I'm behind, November 3rd. Or ahead, depends how you look at it, if you have negative or positive beliefs. Yeah. They're both equally interesting days. It's the same birthday as Paul's wife. Did you know that? Wow. No, that would be weird, Molly. 1982 is when we opened the deli, and guess what 2017 is? Okay, so backing up to the food system, food history, food beliefs. We all have beliefs about food and cooking. Where did we get them? From our parents, from the media, from the commercials on TV, whatever you look at in a magazine, from your friends when you went over to your friend's house, what their mother, what their father cooked for dinner, what they didn't have for dinner. People in poverty get beliefs about it from society, creating a setting in which it's hard for them to get access to food. That's a lot of what I think you all have been studying in a good way here. So these beliefs are in all of our minds, but most people don't really know about it. So 1902, what was going on in 1902, right? So the deli building was built in 1902. It was built by an Italian immigrant by the name of Rocco Disderita, came from near Genoa in northern Italy. He came to New York in 1882, and he came to Ann Arbor in 1892. When he came to Ann Arbor in 1892, they were the 5th Italian family in town. The building was built in under 3 months. So our beliefs about construction projects have changed a lot, because it now takes about 3 months just to get the initial meeting to have them look at the drawings. Also, the little building on the corner that's behind there where the cash register is, you all know what we call it, the annex, but you don't know that. That used to be on the corner. That was his brother-in-law, Charles Carmella, owned a food shop, and it was there. Then when he wanted to build his building in 1902, they moved it to the back of the lot. So beliefs about buildings have also changed, because today you would not be permitted to put a building at an odd angle to the street halfway back into a lot and leave it there. But the interesting thing, I wrote about all this history in the book, in the preface, and the interesting thing about where that building is, it reminded me about beliefs. Because beliefs often end up in odd ways, but we just think it's normal, and then once it's in there for a long time, that's the way it stays, because somebody else put it there. Right? So in 1902, a couple things, other things to tell you about that era. So in 1902, January 1 was a major event in Michigan. I'm not a big Michigan sports person per se. I hope that's not totally terrible to say. I like it, but not my major religion. But anyway, 1902, January 1 was a major event in Michigan sports history. Anybody know what it was? It was the first Rose Bowl. First Rose Bowl, Michigan won 48-0. Stanford surrendered with 8 minutes left in the game. And also, just so that you know that beliefs change, it was only 5 yards to get a first down. The field was, I think, 110 yards long, and no forward passes. And most of the fans that were there stood up for most of the game because there were no seats. And it took them over a week to get there from the train station, which is just down the road from the deli, which had been built a few years before and was known, it turns out I didn't know any of this, but was known as one of the most beautiful train stations in the Midwest. So there you go. What else was going on? In Ann Arbor, at least from the 1900 census, there was just under 15,000 people living here. Over half of them were either immigrants or born of immigrants. Just saying. There were about 400 or 360 African Americans living in Ann Arbor at that time. The university had about 3,500 students. Now you have classes with 3,500 students. So the town was a lot smaller. What was going on in food? So our modern beliefs about food are quite interesting. I like people in history that don't get mentioned by other people. So I learned a lot from getting ready for this presentation. There's a Hasidic Jewish saying that the teacher learns 5 times more than the student, and I tried to make that actually come true. So I started to look at, like, what's the food I grew up on, which is like a lot of this stuff. That's 1956, but it didn't just start in 1956. It goes back before, and I don't know exactly where, but different things about what we accept as normal didn't always exist. So potato chips. Anybody know who invented potato chips? So potato chips were invented in Saratoga Springs by African American. And they're still delicious. That was 1840s, 1850s. 1849 was another interesting African American contributed to the modern food system, was a guy named Joseph Lee, who in Massachusetts he created the Royal Worcester Breadcrumb Company. So y'all didn't know, but you couldn't used to buy breadcrumbs. Where did breadcrumbs come from? It's so weird, like they used to make them. But this guy invented a machine that would process it so they could put it in a can, and they could start to sell it to you. So very interesting things started to happen out in the food world. So I started to look at some of these things I grew up on, right? Anybody know this? Can you see this? So cream cheese is actually an American thing. It was developed in the 1880s by a guy named William Lawrence in upstate New York. Anybody know why it's called Philadelphia? Val, you know, because you work here with us. Why is it called Philadelphia?
Because in the 1800s, Philadelphia had a reputation as being a source for good cheese, and there was a marketing guy who got hooked up with William Lawrence, who didn't want it to be called Lawrence's cream cheese because nobody knew who Lawrence was, but thought they would sell a lot more if it was called Philadelphia.
I get to work with a lot of good people. That was beautiful. Based on the package, what would you believe about this when it's called Philadelphia cream cheese? Right. So we believe things because sometimes we don't think about it, but it actually turns out to be a little misleading. So he developed this cream cheese. At the time, it was a very fresh cheese. Like you had to eat it in a few days, a week or whatever, 10 days. He later sold it to Kraft in 1928, and Kraft figured out how to pasteurize the cheese in order to give it a long shelf life. So I don't know if anybody besides me has done this, but I've actually kept one of these in my refrigerator for 3 years and opened it, and it was fine. No, I'm serious. I'm not making this up. Well, that's a different question. Tuna does age, though. But so that's this, cream cheese. So this is what I grew up on. I thought this was a great product. I believed that this is a really high quality product, but it turns out to be an industrial facsimile of the real product. But 99% of the country believes this is high quality. So see, if you believe this is high quality, you just keep going. You think it's normal. This is going on in society too. If you grow up in a racist community, it's normal. If you grow up in an anti-Semitic community, it's normal. It's only when you get new information comes at you from a new source that you might start to question some of your beliefs. So a few of you will now go home and go, oh my God, I didn't even know. Let's see. Anybody else grow up on this stuff? This is what totally bummed me out though. It's like I haven't bought any of this in like 40 years. But they changed the packages on a lot of them, man. So I have no real attachment to the product, but I have like emotional attachment to the design of the package from my childhood, and this Nestle's Quick thing bummed me out big time, man. It doesn't look anything like what it looked like when I was little. Jell-O. So part of what I want to show you about this stuff, that we actually have negative beliefs about a lot of this, but there also was positive stuff that was going on. So I actually didn't know this till I started to study. I mean, I knew a little bit about the history of Jell-O, but so Jell-O was developed in New York State also by a guy named Pearl Waite. He was the first one to take gelatin powder and add coloring to it, and his wife gave him the name Jell-O. See, we think of these, I have negative beliefs about them because I think about them as these like mass market, giant factory, industrial things, but it turns out it was just some guy trying to figure out how to make a living that invented some. And here's the interesting part, is this was known at the time as democratizing gelatin. Yeah, so I'm going to change your beliefs and change my beliefs doing this reading. See, gelatin took a long time to make from scratch, right? You had to cook the horse hooves down. Is a long thing. So only rich people had gelatin. Because unless you had servants that were going to stand there all day making gelatin, you did not have gelatin. So if you wanted to show off your wealth in the late 1800s, one way you could do that was by having lots of stuff in aspic. No, it's true. So this guy, he brought gelatin to the people. This is true. So I'm just showing that it kind of made me think back on some stuff I had negative beliefs on, actually started in a really positive setting. He made a positive contribution. Campbell's soup, we don't have today, but I didn't get that one, but Campbell's soup, anybody had that? Tomato soup. So I brought a tomato. So a lot of y'all know from studying food history that tomatoes are native to the Western Hemisphere, and many of you might know that really up until the 1860s, 70s, 80s, tomatoes were not eaten here. People thought they were poisonous. Yeah. So Campbell's, the history of Campbell started in 1869 by Joseph Campbell and another guy who's somewhere disappeared in history, Abraham Anderson, and they started to can products. But the soup was started in 1897, and it quickly won an award 3 years later, won a gold medal in Paris. It was a major product innovation. So coming back to Mr. Disderita in 1902, I started to think, man, this guy must have got this can from his distributor and thought, this is really great. We're putting this new product on the shelf. Major innovation, canned tomato soup. Where else did soup come from? You made it. But here's, see, the interesting thing is that, like for me, cooking is a wonderful, joyous thing that I love to do, and I literally, my girlfriend and I cook dinner every night, unless we're out of town. I don't go out to eat. I wait on all of y'all, and then I go home and we eat dinner at like 10 o'clock. And people are like, why don't you just eat at work? Because I like to cook. But see, back in 1897, in that era, like if you were, families were often a lot bigger, and it was this thing people had to cook every day, and a lot of times you didn't have running water, and you had to haul the water, and then getting gas going, and you didn't have a dishwasher. And the dishes were really onerous. You had to boil the water, bring the water, wash it. So in many ways, this stuff was conceived as the liberation. And I'll say it was the wife because it was more often than not the woman in the family that was doing the cooking. Same with cheese. So American singles. Anybody else grew up on these? So I'm old enough that when we had them, and they didn't have the plastic on the individual. But it was like silly putty, because I don't know if you had this, like if you would come in from the playground and your fingers were dirty and you peeled some off, and then it kept the image. Don't say you didn't learn anything tonight. Okay, so cheese. So the first cheese factory was 1881 in Rome, New York. A guy by the last name of Williams. I'm forgetting his first name for the moment. Where was cheese made before the factory? Made on the farm. Cheese was a daily product. You milked the animals, you made the cheese. They made cheese every day. As everybody who runs a dairy or goat farm, whatever, will tell you, well, especially dairy cows, the cows work every day. They don't get Sunday off. They don't get Saturday off. They don't get Christmas off. So when they started to send milk to the cheese plants, it was framed in many ways as the liberation of the farm wives. So I'm not saying this is good, but what I'm saying is at the time there was positive outcomes as well as what came to be these negative, I have a very negative beliefs about this, but there were positive beliefs at the time. It was freeing the women from having to make the cheese every day because you had no refrigeration. What happened to the milk if you didn't make the cheese? And if you were living on the edge and you didn't make the cheese, you just basically wasted a natural resource that you needed in order to make a living. So Mr. Kraft invented this basically 1911, again, processed cheese. By the way, that's the same year Joseph Labadie donated his collection of anarchist literature to the graduate library. This is what I like about history. See, that all this stuff overlays that y'all didn't know was overlaying. It's also the year Emma Goldman came here, which I wrote about in the book. In 1918 or 19, she came here before she was kicked out and sent back to Russia, and the mayor banned her from speaking. It's quite an interesting thing. There's an interesting article about students disrupting her talk and throwing stuff at her. Quite interesting. Some things don't change. Anyway, in 1935, they figured out how to make Kraft singles. How did they do it? His brother figured out how to pour liquid melted pasteurized cheese on long tables, and then they would cut it into slices. And then the big innovation was that when they made it, figure out how to do it in a long roll so they didn't have to have the whole sheet tray cut up. This is where it came from. I grew up on it. Anybody else grew up on this? Okay, excellent. Let's do a couple more and then we'll move forward. Bird's eye vegetables. I didn't bring any, but anybody grew up on those? Okay, so if you're younger, you don't have it. But when I grew up, frozen and canned vegetables is how most vegetables came, and we weren't like, we were a middle-class family living in the suburbs, so it's not like we didn't have access to stuff, but that's what people ate. So again, I have very negative beliefs about frozen and canned vegetables from that upbringing, but so Clarence Birdseye was a guy who actually experimented with freezing, and he experimented with freezing because he discovered on a trip to Labrador in the Maritimes in Canada that things that froze really quickly on their boat actually tasted good, when most freezing at that time was very inefficient and the product tasted bad. So then he embarked on this life mission to figure out how to recreate this natural freezing that occurred out on the boat. And in 1924, he figured out how to make this machine. Long story short, between 1920, when they introduced these frozen vegetables, and 1980, American consumption of vegetables doubled per capita. Why? Because a lot more people had access. So again, this stumped me because I had very negative beliefs, but it showed me there was actually positive sides to what I had judged maybe unfairly in a totally negative way. And I'm not suggesting you go buy bird's eye vegetables. It just sort of changed my beliefs. What else we got? Kool-Aid, fish sticks. Oh, one more. So Mara from Zingtrain, because I was teaching, she went to the store for me today, and she couldn't find Mrs. Paul's, and she's like, is this okay? And I'm like, no, not really, but we're going to make do. So pretend this is Mrs. Paul's fish sticks. And who grew up on those? Anybody? Okay. So Mrs. Paul's fish sticks. So that's how I grew up. Regular event at our family for dinner. So it turns out that Mrs. Paul's fish sticks, actually interesting story. So these were developed by a bar owner in Pennsylvania, Edward Pijek, of Polish origin and Polish immigrant, and he had too many deviled crabs in his restaurant. So in order to avoid food waste, he started freezing them. And then he started selling them. And then he started to freeze other fish products and sell those. So part of what I loved with this story, which I didn't know till I was getting ready for this, so beliefs. Here's how he sold his fish sticks to great effect. He would get the store owner, the grocery store owner, to buy the fish sticks, and then the next day his wife would go in pretending to be a customer, and she would go on a great length about how fabulous the product was and how excited she was that the store owner was carrying it. And then over the course of the next week or two, her cousins would come in and their friends would come in. So think about beliefs. This is how beliefs were being influenced. Sir?
So I ate at Zingerman the other day, and I noticed you guys serve Commons mayonnaise.
Yeah.
Could you speak to your belief system on the idea? Because I feel like that could be on that table, easily be on that table.
Yeah, I don't know. I have to think about it a little bit. I believe that homemade mayonnaise is a lot better, and I certainly make it at home. It's actually not that hard. It's one of those challenges that we all make some compromises. in our lives. And, you know, I drove here. I didn't ride my bike or whatever. But it's interesting because of how you start to evolve these things. And what we were selling in 1982, we were selling Hellmann's, but quality-wise, many things we've raised the bar enormously. What we used to think was good, now I'd be embarrassed to serve you. And Hellmann's is, I think, the best bottled, pre-packaged mayonnaise, unless you're from the South and then you like Duke's. People have very passionate beliefs about mayonnaise. It's a good study. I actually have at home a hand, you know, those old things that they sold you these things to make mayonnaise. It's like a glass tube with a metal pump. And this was a way to make it easier for people to make mayonnaise at home. It's quite interesting. I like those kind of obscure things. Anyways, all of this stuff. One more, McDonald's. Anybody know when McDonald's started? 1937. So again, I have very negative beliefs about McDonald's, but it basically was a food truck. Started by two brothers. Like, so we would go, wow, they're so cool, man. They're cooking burgers in this food truck. It's very grassroots. The problem came later when they made it into a national industrial institution. But the origins of it were really quite positive. Oh, yeah, my favorite childhood food, Kraft macaroni and cheese. We do, I know. That's what made me pause when I said, do you know? Are you ready for the clicker?
No.
Okay.
No, we'll come back.
So I grew up on Kraft macaroni and cheese. So here's a fact that's not on your clicker. I didn't know this till last week. Kraft macaroni and cheese is the largest grocery store item sold in Canada. Yeah, the number one selling grocery item in Canada is Kraft macaroni and cheese. In fact, some people, it turns out, call it the national dish of Canada.
All right, Ari, we're ready for the clicker question.
Okay, I'm ready too.
Okay.
Go ahead. Are they clicking? Are you clicking?
They're clicking, yeah.
Do you look different when you're clicking?
A lot of angst.
Oh, for your photo op.
All right.
I've been photographed lately with many things, but not with one of those.
Last call, we're going to close the poll.
Oh, no. No
Okay.
voter fraud.
There you go. They chose B.
They're having a hard time, man. Is their grade dictated by how they do on this?
No, no, no.
I think the right answer isn't the right answer, 1937. Yeah. It's the same, exactly, 1937. So just by the way, here's a little quote from Bertrand Russell for you just to show you. So he said, the fact that an opinion has been widely held is no evidence whatever that it is not utterly absurd. In view of the silliness of the majority of mankind, a widespread belief is more likely to be foolish than sensible. Just saying. 1982, we opened a deli. Who was in town? Some of y'all. So, as Paul likes to say, there was nobody walking around Ann Arbor going, I got to have a $10 sandwich today or I'm going to die. No. Well, actually, we got people fly in from LA or whatever just to come eat. It's shocking, but it's true. So, when we opened, there was not a lot of demand for what we were doing. The general wisdom when we opened was we were doomed to fail. Ann Arbor had 10 or 12, it's true, 10 or 12 delis closed in the previous decade. Some of you will have blocked all this out because of the belief filter. You like us now, so you can't remember, but everybody told us it's a bad neighborhood, don't go down there. There's still no parking, as y'all know, painfully to this day, and up until cell phones with all the one-way streets was very difficult to find, which the city compounded the problem by reversing the flow of the one-way streets every 7 or 8 years, just to really torture the poor people from Kalamazoo and Detroit and Toledo that figured out how to get here and then ended up getting a ticket going what was once the right way, now the wrong way, another life metaphor about beliefs. Extra virgin olive oil was unheard of in this part of the world. the food that we all take for granted at Zingerman's and many of you eat or have eaten regularly was barely found. We also, by the way, we were in, it really was the middle-class African-American neighborhood. We sold greens and ham hocks. How our beliefs changed. We also sold cigarettes with the idea of getting people in, and we tried to sell them cheap. I'm just saying, people used to smoke in the deli because it was normal. It was believed to be normal. So I just want to show you how beliefs start to evolve and change, and we forget, because that filter about what we take in is also true for the past. What we remember is not actually what happened, it's what fits what we currently believe. And we dismiss the information that doesn't fit with our current beliefs, and we allow in the information. This is how history is written. And this is back to, don't you just judge what's really true. No one actually knows what really happened. We only have different people's versions of it, okay? So I guess my point is just that back in 1982, there was a lot less food system. There was a farmer's market, but it was much smaller. The grocery stores did not have organic sections. Olive oil was really inexpensive because it was not very good, et cetera, et cetera. 2017, fast forwarding, that's where you and I live now. What do we got now? Now we got 5-year-olds coming in with their parents trying to decide which goat cheese to buy. This is normal for us. We got 6-year-olds coming in, checking out the olive oil, going, Mommy, I want that one. We got little kids who have become accustomed to eating the food at a high quality level and take it in a good way for granted. The cream cheese that I mentioned earlier, so this is what most people think is good. But in 1999, we decided, because we do traditional full-flavored food, to turn back the clock and go back to making cream cheese how they would have been making it 100 years ago, before all of this. The funny thing is, so we make handmade cream cheese. It's incredibly simple. Milk, rennet, a little salt, drain naturally using an old process called gravity, very low tech, and then you add some cream. That's why it's called cream cheese. The funny thing is, after 3 generations of everybody thinking this is God's gift to the dairy world, and you bring them the real thing, what do you think they say? That's not cream cheese. And I had some nice, not Jody, but some nice chef friends of mine who are like, that's not cream cheese. I'm like, okay, up is down. You're telling, this is cream cheese. This is not cream cheese. That's cream cheese. And people would taste it in early days. I remember standing in the deli very vividly, and they would get this taste, and they would go, wow, that tastes like cheese. And I would go, exactly. But then they would be really mad at us because it only lasted like 2 or 3 weeks. And I was like, I think your beliefs are inverted. What you ought to be worried about is, why is this still good in my refrigerator 3 years later? Why has it not gone bad? Is this making any sense? So see, when you look through your own beliefs, you don't see a lot. When you start to come into contact with other information, your beliefs start to change, right? So 2017 is where we are. The food system attention that y'all are paying through either sitting in this room tonight, coming to the excellent speakers, it sounds like, that have been here the last few weeks, which I'm bummed that I missed. All the great books that are out there, the community work that's out there is fabulous. The farmer's market, I mean, I feel really lucky to be living in this time to see how much great stuff has happened over the last 35 years that we've been in business. So what I want to finish with is just a few thoughts and then a few of my own beliefs. So 2 things to bring up. One is ecosystem in this class context is a normal, probably part of your conversation, but I actually look at business as part of an ecosystem also, and I look at our business as an ecosystem within the ecosystem, and each part of our business, like the creamery, which has only 12 employees, or the candy company, which makes candy bars and peanut butter, got only 5 employees. Those are little parts of our ecosystem. So the industrial model is all about separation and specialization. It doesn't work. It doesn't work in agriculture, which y'all know is monocropping. It doesn't work in business either. I just spent 2 days talking about the energy crisis in the workplace, which is a different talk that I'm not doing tonight, but I've written about. The industrial model has got this fallacious belief that, like, the pesticides on your land stop at the end of the fence line. They got the belief that what this guy does doesn't impact what this woman does, when, of course, we're all impacting each other. So I really start to look at, like, every action that we take at Zingerman's, every action you take, every action I take, based on what we believe, is impacting all the people around us. Where's Rob? Are you back there? So Rob grew up going to Zingerman's. You went to community high, right? No? Country day. Okay. But he now has a nice restaurant too in Provincetown, and back for a Zing Train seminar. So we did the introductions yesterday in the seminar, and I've known him for a number of years. But he talked about how his beliefs about food were formed by coming to Zingerman's. So for better, whatever, we are impacting the ecosystem of Ann Arbor, and then through mail order, whatever, the ecosystem around the country of people's beliefs around food. So for me, that's in a good way a lot of pressure, because what we do, other people pay attention to, and we take it seriously. I want to touch briefly on the anarchists, just because I like them, but also because, interestingly, anarchist thinking, which is really kind of ignored, but I found actually parallels progressive business, but also had some really interesting things about food. So in 1899, Peter Kropotkin, who was a Russian prince that gave up his noble title and fled Russian prison to the West, wrote a book called Fields, Factories, and Farms, and he wrote in there about local food. He wrote in there about the importance of every community growing its own produce. He wrote in there about not shipping food across the world and how it didn't make sense. In 1902, he wrote another book called Mutual Aid, which is all refuting Thomas Hobbes' belief that nature is just a war of all against all, and we got to beat each other down, and the fittest survive, which was Darwin. And he said the fittest survive, it's true, but the fittest are the most collaborative. The fittest are the ones that help those around them. So there was a lot of interesting anarchist thinking that was going on around the time Rocco Disderita built the Delhi building, which actually turns out 100 and something years later to be very aligned with, I think, certainly with my thinking about communities and business now, but often is dismissed. On page 7, I just want to stress the importance of alignment. So if all of the things on the page that you see there are not in alignment, trouble comes. If your body's out of alignment, what happens? Pain. Who's driven their car when it's out of alignment? What happens? Yeah. So when you're out of alignment, it's very stressful and difficult. It is not uncommon that we have vision or values, but our beliefs below the surface are not in alignment with what we're trying to achieve. If that's the case, it's going to be like driving your car when it's out of alignment. It's going to keep veering to the left or the right, but it's not going to go where you think it's supposed to go. There's a reason. Why? Because we act on our beliefs. We don't act on what we think we're supposed to do. We act on what's really in our hearts, what we really believe to be true. Okay? Why does this play out? Because in the food system, and I'm going to come back to it on the next page, I believe that there is a belief that good food should be really cheap, and I like that belief, but I don't know how to make that happen and pay the people who do the work on it, pay benefits for the people who do the work on it, pay your rent and everything else, and have it come out cheap. So when people in our industry open restaurants with a very positive belief about trying to create access through low prices, the end result, because it's not aligned with reality, is they can't pay their bills. And over, we see them go out of business. And I'm not saying we want to make food inaccessible, but the problem is when you pay people, it's very difficult. Those costs, in a good way, add up. I like paying people. I want to pay them a lot more. And the more we pay, the more the costs go up. So this is one of the big challenges of getting things into alignment. Okay, I know that goes against what many people in the world believe, but it's my experience. So on the next page are just some of my beliefs, and I'll move towards wrapping up, letting a few questions come up. So these are some of my beliefs. Most of these are what we believe from the beginning. Some have been embellished since 1982 over the years. I believe you can really taste the difference. This belief seems obvious, but I will tell you that in 1982, when we opened, the standard belief in the food business was the consumer can't tell whether it's really good or not. They also believed people wouldn't pay. We believed the opposite. You can taste the difference. Anybody could taste the difference. Any 6-year-old, 3-year-old could tell the difference between this and the Martelli macaroni that we use at the Roadhouse. How do I know? Because there's like 4-year-olds, and the parents go, where do you want to go for your birthday? And the 4-year-old picks Zingerman's Roadhouse, and they order that macaroni, and they won't eat this. That's what we call a good problem, but I got parents going like, my kid won't eat any other macaroni and cheese. I'm like, well, if you cooked with this same ingredients, they would probably eat yours too. If you cook them this, and they had the good one, they're not going to go back, okay? So I believe that anybody who's interested can tell the difference. You do not need a degree. No offense to Jody and me and whoever that have done decades of professional food cooking. Any 7-year-old, if you sit them down with industrial American cheese and a farmhouse cheddar, could tell the difference. If you try not to, of course, you might not be able to, but that's where you have the belief you can't do it, and it will be self-fulfilling. Similarly, I believe everyone can cook. One of the more interesting history people in radical political history is C.L.R. James from Trinidad. Many interesting things he said, appropriate to how we run our company. Every cook can govern. I believe it. That's how we try to run the company. I would also like to invert his statement. Every governor could cook. It don't matter what political party you're from. Everybody can cook. It is a very simple skill that everyone can learn to do. However, if you have the belief you can't cook and you follow that cycle that I drew for you, if you believe you can't cook, it's self-fulfilling. Okay? I believe it's a lot easier to cook good food if you start with good stuff. And I understand that some people in financially disadvantaged settings or in food desert settings don't have access to good ingredients. I get it. It is very difficult to cook good food using mediocre ingredients. There are many people who make way more money than I do that walk right past the good food, don't want to get up on Saturday to go to the farmer's market, that are buying these tomatoes right now while I'm standing here talking to you, and they're upper level executives in very fancy companies driving big cars. So I understand people who have disadvantaged settings that can't get it, but there's a lot of people that can get it that choose not to. If you start with good ingredients, it's very easy to cook good food. It's easier than getting here tonight, to be honest with you. Oh, you want to do another clicker. See, this is why you're in charge of the clickers, because I'm just trying to stay on my stuff. Okay, what is it? Can y'all read that? Okay, click. Malik's clicking in his head.
All right, 5 more seconds.
Did you get it? A. A is correct. So, by the way, back to 1900, just on these statistics. In 1900, there were 5.7 million farms in the U.S. with an average size of 138 acres, which is still really big by like the standards that we think of, about 138 acres. Today, whatever, 2.1, 2.2 million farms. Average size is almost 3 to 3.5 times what it was in 1900. So less farms, bigger farms. Y'all already knew that. Just sharing data. So, a couple other quick, yeah, Jody.
What's the land? We'd have to do the math. I don't know if I can.
Here, you can do it while I'm talking. I like the multitasking. Okay, just quickly, other things. The most expensive foods do not always taste better. But inexpensive foods in retail settings are rarely going to be delicious. Why? Because if they're made from really good ingredients and the people actually got paid, which not all of them do, we're in trouble. There's a guy in L.A. who I don't know, but I just read this yesterday. Jody might know him. Diep Tran owns a place called Good Girl Dinette, which I'm going to go to next time I'm in L.A., and maybe you'll go too. And he wrote a really interesting article, which I thought was fascinating, which said, It's about why cheap eats lists, which everybody loves, are really destructive. Why? Because the people who work in the kitchens at the cheap eats list are not getting paid anything hardly. That's why they're cheap. And what he talked about is changing the beliefs about immigrant restaurants, because the cheap restaurants are the immigrant restaurants where the family's working long hours for almost no pay. And he said, just because I'm of Vietnamese origin doesn't mean I need to be charging a low price. I want to pay the people more. Again, interesting things about beliefs. Who does cook regularly here? Okay, pretty high proportion. I'm going to suggest it's a higher proportion than the average in town, and I'll suggest Ann Arbor has a higher proportion than many other towns. Practice helps. This is true of everything. If you cook regularly, it's not hard. If you haven't cooked in 2 years, like I run every day, it's not hard for me. If you haven't run in 10 years, it's going like the first time I ran 25, 30 years ago, I couldn't walk for 7 days afterwards. It's not that you're stupid, you're just out of shape. If you haven't practiced, it's the same thing. I do believe people will pay more for better food. I want to pay our vendors more so they can make a living. We're about to shift to better black peppercorns. It's going to cost us significantly more. Why? Because the people in the village that are growing it are going to get more, and it's going to make a difference in the village, and that's the idea. So that's what I think. Our job is to pay people more so they can afford to buy what we're selling. The way to make good food inexpensive is to produce it yourself. So if you grow your own, it seems cheap. Why? Because you don't bill yourself for the labor. You don't pay FICA, workman's comp, insurance, and everything else. You just go, oh, it's on Saturday afternoon. It's fun. But if you actually allocate the cost of it, you will find that the tomato you thought was inexpensive is not that inexpensive. I read an anarchist study of workforce. 46% roughly of work done in the United States is unpaid labor done in the home. Like we don't bill ourselves for doing laundry, but if you did, your laundry would cost a lot more. So the best way is to grow your own. Melvin Parson is a good friend of mine. Yep, Malik knows him too, is starting a project in Ypsilanti called We the People Growers Association to help bring growing back to the communities. If you go back to the old days, people grew their own. That's why it was cheap. And I'm all for it. I think it's great and it's delicious. And by the way, when people grow their own, they like cooking it better. Simple dishes with great ingredients and a little practice are the way to go. It is true that you can cook all day to make Thanksgiving dinner, but what I do is start with good pasta, good olive oil, good cheese, and a couple vegetables, and it takes 15 minutes. And I'm not joking. And I don't know how close y'all live to McDonald's, but it cannot be faster than that. Good food does not take long. Some lettuce from the farmer's market with a little pinch of olive oil, sea salt, grated a little Parmigiano Reggiano cheese takes under 5 minutes. One slice of good bread from the bakehouse, excellent, delicious. I'm serious, it's a delicious meal. You cooked it yourself, under 5 minutes. The key is getting good ingredients. Last two things, what does local really mean? So I'm all for local geographically where it makes sense, but sometimes things don't grow here. Even with global warming, which no longer exists. So unless we want to give up chocolate, coffee, tea, olive oil, lemons, and all sorts of other things, which I'm not suggesting you give up, it doesn't make sense to only be eating within the geographic area. So our definition of local, which I believe really strongly in, is that we have a relationship with the people we buy from and a relationship with the people that we sell to, so that when we're buying chocolate, I know who's making it, and we've contributed positively to the village that's growing the cacao, so that the relationships are meaningful, not just that it's geographically local because somebody lives near the Diet Coke factory, and it's geographically local, but there's no relationship with the production, there's no relationship with the quality, and no grounding in the community. And the last piece Lily said is just, I believe very strongly in doing business here. I love Ann Arbor, but not because it's Ann Arbor, but doing business in the place that one lives, and being in the business to me is very different than owning some share of a business half a world away or half a country away. And I don't know that it's evil, but it's not the way that I want to work. So for me, it's very important to see all these familiar faces and wait on you and clear your plates and help you to the car on a snowy day or whatever it might be, and know the people that work in our business. So I'm not rushing, but I'm probably out of time, because even though you all start dysfunctionally 10 minutes after you start, you end promptly when you end.
Yes.
which is another interesting metaphor for how beliefs are formed, which is that you all, if you go to school here, believe that 6:30 is 6:40. And by the way, this is going on all over the world in some other version. So thank you very much. My email is ari@zingermans.com. The last thing I was going to say is just the reality of life is that I don't believe we can make anybody change their beliefs. So I've been studying beliefs hard for the last 3-4 years, and I got a whole list. If you want it, you can email me, that I believe is why people do change their beliefs. But one of them is not. They got a lot of lectures about how bad they were and got told to change their beliefs. I would suggest the roots go deeper, the more we get told that we're wrong. So what I would suggest is we can model it, we can share new information, we can share new experiences, we can share new insights. I'll read you one last quote from an anarchist that you never heard of. He was a Catholic anarchist. Y'all didn't even know there were Catholic anarchists. His name was Amon Hennessy. Very interesting guy. He said, "We really can't change the world. We really can't change other people. The best we can do is start a few thinking here and there. The best way to do this, if we are sincere, is to change ourselves. The only revolution worthwhile is the one-man revolution within the heart. Each one could make this by himself and not need to wait on a majority." So I would just say, if you go cook a meal with good ingredients and respectfully for the people who produce the food and respectfully for the food itself, it's a radical act. If you pay a little more to the farmer who grew something and worked their butt off, and believe me, they're not getting rich, that's a radical act. These are the things that change the food system. If you stop buying this and buy artisan macaroni that some family worked their butt off to produce, it costs you more, but it's making a difference. So these small things to me are what ultimately add up to it. Thank you all very much. Sorry to go 2 minutes over.
Thank you.